Welcome to this video on Gran Turismo 7, where we'll discuss the new physics. Since update 1.71, the game has an entirely new physics system, a whole new way of driving the cars. And I wanted to talk about it a bit more in depth than in my previous video. I made a short video yesterday to quickly talk about update 1.71. Of course, we talked about the new physics, but since there were quite a few other new features in this update, we couldn't really go into detail about it. This time, I tested several things in Gran Turismo 7, tried many cars, and played using both a steering wheel and a controller. Really in different racing conditions with different performance categories as well, just to form an opinion on this new physics, and I simply wanted to share my thoughts with you. To talk a bit about what I thought of this new physics, the things that I feel have really changed with the arrival of this new physics. Share your feedback in the comments about the new physics, whether you think it's better or worse. If some things improved and others got worse, feel free to mention that too. Also, I'll take this opportunity to give a quick reminder to sign up for the contest that lets you win the game of your choice through a partnership between my channel and Instant Gaming. The link is below the video, it's free. The drawing is on the last day of the month, and winners get any game they choose. You can also request PSN cards to buy Gran Turismo 7 or other PlayStation games, so don't hesitate to participate. And don't forget that you can also use this same link to go to Instant Gaming and buy your games at lower prices than elsewhere while giving a little support to my channel. The first good thing about this new physics is that steering the cars with the controller is much more precise and responsive than before the update. Before this, with the old physics of Gran Turismo 7, and that's been the case since its release, so for 4 years now, I felt like there was a kind of latency in the game, a delay between the moment you started to move the joystick on your controller and the moment the game would respond to the steering change. Especially when you made somewhat extreme direction changes like quick steering movements, the game tended to smooth out your inputs a lot to avoid accidental inputs on the controller. I think that's been fixed, largely corrected with this new physics. I find it's much easier to be precise with the controller now, especially because there's much less latency than before. And actually, since there's much less latency than before, since the car starts to react instantly as soon as you even slightly touch the joystick, you can immediately see how the car turns, so you can react right away and know if you need to turn more or less. Basically, steering corrections are much easier to make. And I think that, paradoxically, even though the game is more responsive and maybe a bit more aggressive, you also have to be a bit more precise as a player. That overall it makes it easier to handle a lot of turns, especially the slightly longer ones, the ones that are, how should I say, more consistent. I find that loaded corners are generally much easier to take and much faster than before with the controller. And that's pretty satisfying. And that's true both at low speed and high speed. Overall, I think the work they've done on this is pretty impressive. I don't know why they didn't do this sooner. I don't know exactly which parameter they changed. I think driving with a controller is completely different, like night and day. Driving with a controller feels even more different after this update than with a steering wheel, though some changes affect steering wheels too. Controller driving has seen significant update, and I think that those who didn't like Gran Turismo 7 before with a controller because it was considered a bit stiff, I think they'll probably enjoy it a lot more now because, well, it's actually much less stiff. Rear-wheel drive cars now have much better breakaway behavior and improved drifting as a result. The loss of traction, I'm not sure if that's really the right word to describe it, but I think that before this new physics update on Gran Turismo 7, powerful rear-wheel drive cars, especially engine-swapped cars or cars that were really extremely modified, were very unpleasant to drive. In rear-wheel drive, again, because often, due to their power in corners, you could lose them extremely abruptly. That means that without much warning, with just 1 or 2% more throttle, the car would suddenly snap sideways, and then it was impossible to recover it. So the car would start sliding from the rear. It was extremely brutal, extremely violent, and it was almost certain that you couldn't recover it and you were going to spin out. I think now, with the new physics that came after the update 1.71, well, first of all, I feel like there's no longer that feeling of extremely sudden loss of grip. I think it happens a lot less than before. And above all, it's much more gradual. That means you start to see and feel the car sliding before it's really too late. And above all, the control and handling of drifting is like 50,000 times better than before the update. Like now, drifting has really become much easier. Again, don't get me wrong, I don't think this update made the game more arcade-like. Simply, I think there are quite a few settings that have been softened, that have been better adjusted so that some things are just more intuitive to handle, like drifting. And indeed, I always found drifting in Gran Turismo 7 to be a chore before, even though clearly there's still a bit of work for me to be really comfortable with drifting in Gran Turismo 7. Something has changed in terms of acceleration management and how progressive it is, and in the grip of the tires. And that makes us much more able to understand what the car is going to do when it starts to slide. And as a result, we're also much more able to counter it, to control everything we need to control. Acceleration, steering, braking, whether it's to take more angle, less angle, regain grip, or lose it. Honestly, it's like night and day. What they've done here for drifting and slide control is remarkable. So what I'm telling you here applies, let's say, to regular cars, all drift cars, and let's say some street cars like these that are highly modified. On the other hand, I think that cars with a lot of downforce, so let's say race cars or cars really designed for the track. Now, all the cars that have a lot of aerodynamic downforce, once they start to slide, I find they're actually much harder to catch than before. In this case, I think that with these cars, the loss of grip has increased, meaning that the suddenness of losing control or traction has gone up a lot, and it's very complicated to recover them, especially since there are race prototypes and all that. Since we're discussing aerodynamics, I think this update has greatly increased the downforce difference between the cars. What I mean is, for me, there are now just two categories of cars in Gran Turismo 7. On one side, there are road cars and race cars, let's say medium performance, like Group 3, for example, Group B. And on the other side, the race cars. Really high performance ones, like Group 1, like some prototype hypercars, even some Vision Gran Turismo cars. In the first category, so the race cars and let's say medium performance and road cars, I find that these have much less downforce than before the update. Basically, I find that it's become harder to take certain corners at high speed. They're less glued to the ground, and you really feel the effect more now. Let's say that the air could have a bit of an effect on the car, kind of lifting it a little and making it lose a bit of tire grip, being less stuck to the road. In contrast with race cars, especially hypercars, Group 1 and related vehicles, I feel like the physics push down much more on these cars in the corners, and there are a whole bunch of turns that we could maybe take at 220 kilometers an hour before that we can now take at 230, 235. So I feel like these cars are faster, more glued to the ground, and it's easier to go through a bunch of fast, loaded corners, whereas the others have become a bit slower. And by the way, that's something we'll talk about later in this video. There are certain categories of challenges, certain races, especially with road cars and Group 3 cars. So let's say somewhat intermediate races, where the lap times that were doable before have simply become impossible because the cars are slower. Whereas with Group 1 cars or hypercars, some lap times have even been shortened. I also feel like, let me know in the comments if you have the same impression or if maybe it's just a placebo, but I feel like there have been quite a few changes in tire management, especially when it comes to warm-up times. I feel like the soft tires heat up much faster and wear out much quicker than before the update. On the other hand, I feel like the medium and hard tires, especially the hard tires, last much longer and also take a lot more time to warm up than before, which means you'll have to cover quite a bit more distance with them before they start to have better grip. And paradoxically, even though I just told you that the medium and hard tires wear out slower than before, their wear rate has still been increased. So it's a bit of a paradox, but overall, I feel like the tire wear curve isn't the same anymore. Before, I think it was kind of linear, like if you did 10 laps, the tires would wear out, for example, twice as much as in 5 laps. I feel like that's changed now. I feel like the tire grip degradation happens earlier. So for example, after 2 or 3 laps in some races, you already start to feel a difference that before you might have only felt after 4 or 5 laps. So that's just my personal take on the degradation. I find that the tire wear degradation happens faster, but I think it's less abrupt, meaning it really spreads out over a longer period of time. And above all, for now, I haven't yet reached situations where, because my tires have lost so much grip from wear, I simply can't drive the car anymore. So I feel like the tires wear out faster at the beginning, but that their maximum wear takes much longer to reach. And honestly, it's much rarer to have races where, because you made a bad strategy or didn't manage your tire changes well, you end up barely able to take even a single corner because the tires are completely dead. I feel it now takes longer to get grip with mediums and hards than before. Less time to get grip with softs. I feel like in any case, the tires wear out faster, but they wear more gradually and actually wear less over time. For me, there's only one downside to this physics update, which we'll discuss soon. Overall, I find the new physics much better than before, especially with the controller. Well, not just that, we'll talk about it later, but with a steering wheel too. It's cooler than before, at least in my opinion. And it's true that with a controller in particular, it's a whole different world compared to before. Actually, you can almost feel like you're playing a different game. And by the way, I hope that for Gran Turismo 8, which must be in development right now, and should come out maybe in about 3 years or something like that, I hope they'll build on this controller driving physics foundation, because, well, it's much more lively. Actually, you can feel or understand the car's reactions much better. It's much easier to be precise, it's more responsive, it's all positive when using the controller. Overall, it's all positive. With the steering wheel too. Though the wheels seem less improved in this update compared to the controllers, which receive special attention. Driving with the steering wheel is still much more enjoyable since you can take advantage of the new tire behavior and the new handling of grip loss and breakaway. All of that is also something you'll be able to enjoy with the steering wheel. There's something else you get with the steering wheel that I don't really feel with the controller, and that's, well, I think maybe it's just a placebo effect. You can tell me what you think in the comments. But I feel like the body movements, especially the suspension movements, are much more noticeable than before. I feel like the vibration setting for the suspension, or whatever you want to call it, is higher than before when you're driving with the steering wheel. And that's no matter what brand of steering wheel you use. I've started to have quite a few of them. I'm going to test 3 different ones here on GTS 7, compatible with the PS5. And even if we're not using Fanatec, since now there's actually a partnership with Fanatec, even if we're using Thrustmaster wheels like the T248R, for example, I think you can feel the body roll and the suspension knocking in the corners better. This likely existed before, but with this update, it's much more noticeable. So whether you use a wheel or controller, I think it's a positive update overall. Only 2 things are annoying with this update. It's that, well, actually, road cars, even if they're maybe more realistic to drive in terms of their downforce, well, they're also a bit more understeering. Sometimes you have to fight them more to turn, especially when entering a corner. But that also comes from the fact that, well, the cars don't brake quite the same way as before with this new physics. You also have to brake a bit later. I find that the cars stop in a shorter distance. But let's say that the suspension movements caused by the car's braking, so the fact that the car leans forward, are a bit more pronounced. That's something you really feel at the wheel, which is a bit harder, I think, to feel with the controller because the vibrations and the feedback there aren't very strong. But I think that part of this loss of grip and the understeering we get with the cars comes from the fact that actually when we've braked just a bit before, the suspensions are still, let's say, unsettled by the braking, and we get more body roll, and the cars are a bit more understeery. But overall, let's say that if that's the price to pay for having the rest of the new physics, I think it's pretty acceptable. And in the end, the only thing that's really annoying, I think, with this update, is the fact that all the car performances, all the PP systems have been completely changed. Cars no longer have the same PP as before, so in some cases it's not a big deal. Even in some cases for road cars, well, let's say it gives you a bit more room to improve them, to put them, for example, into the 600 PP range. I had cars that were at 600 that dropped, like now, to 580. So technically, I can boost them a bit more, add some parts to bring them back up to 600. It just shows how much slower road cars are now. Like, clearly there are tracks where I'm losing 10 seconds per lap compared to before this update because, well, road cars are slower. And on the other hand, well, some cars, let's say with a bit higher performance that were, for example, at 700 pp before and were very nice for farming, especially certain races before, well, now they've gone up to, for example, 710, 715. So whatever, let's just say you have to adapt, you have to make new adjustments, you have to come up with new upgrade combinations. What's a bit annoying is that if you really liked a certain car and you had a setup you liked before for a certain event, well, there's a good chance that setup just isn't valid anymore. You might experience similar driving sensations without the car being significantly slower or faster. But you'll probably have to tweak all the settings a bit. The good news about this, to end on a positive note, is that thanks to this change in physics, which shakes up all the settings and all the PP a bit, we might see the game's meta change in the coming days and weeks. I think the best cars in each category won't quite be the same anymore. We'll see, we'll test it out, and of course I'll make a little video to keep you updated. If the meta changes, I'll just make a video for you. The best cars in each category for 2026. Be sure to subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts on the new physics in the comments. Don't hesitate to follow me on Twitch. I'll stream a lot next week with many racing game conferences coming up, even though I didn't stream much last week. Please follow and use Prime to support my Twitch channel. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow for the next video. Bye!